Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I'm joined by my co-host,
Dan.
How you doing, Dan? You seem confused about what your name is.
I mean, who can know their own name? You know, everybody
what is
forgets
really
their name.
a sense of oneself?
I don't know. That's why this is the philosophy podcast we're starting now.
Doing a hard pivot into just doing philosophy now. Yeah.
Yep. Well, this is a Nietzschean podcast.
Yeah, we're going to have to bring up Nietzsche at some point. If you look at the philosophy podcast out there, that's going to have to come up. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is an interesting time for the channel. It's been a we're winding it down pretty soon.
For the year, not forever.
Forever. This is it. No, for the year, we got, of course, David coming up as the last guest. I'm talking to Daniel Nenny, maybe High Yield, and someone else to come on too in December. And then also have James, Pryor on again to talk about what's unfolded. You know, he used to be in charge of segmentation at AMD, what he thinks about what the heck's happened at Zen 5 and Arrow Lake at the end of the year. And then we also, we'll get into it, it seems to still be a very bizarre time for the market in terms of like people not knowing when they want to launch their products. Like, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are some surprises that happen over the next few months. It really is a crazy time. But I guess I'll also say that we're recording this slightly early. It's still on Sunday, the 17th, like we usually record on Sundays, but we're trying to record this instead of in the evening and the early afternoon, so that Gerard can edit it and prepare it all before I go on vacation. So I guess I'll just put that out as well, is that when you're listening to this, I will, if you're a patron, I might be exhausted in an airport somewhere like we're going to Costa Rica, and the flight we got that was a reasonable price that worked for our schedules, it was like, it's on Monday technically, but it's at like 5 a.m. So, I mean,
the ideal time for a flight.
If it's at 5, I mean, we're not going to bed. We're just going to stay awake and try to sleep on the flights on the way there.
Yeah, I've had a few of those flights before, and it's a debate. Do I try to get to bed early and like get up on time, or do I like try to get in a few hours of sleep? And the solution I arrived at for me personally was I drink a ton of water before I go to bed, because then I know I will wake up
to go to the bathroom.
A couple of hours to go to the yes.
Because you're a much heavier sleeper than me, so you're worried the alarm won't wake you up.
I'm worried the alarm won't work, so I'm like, what will work 64 ounces of water.
Yeah, actually, on this note too, I remember one of my good friends, Greg, he stayed with me on a business trip in Nashville. I think this was a year or two ago. And I remember he's like, well, I'm gonna have to get up really early tomorrow. And then we realized he'd have to be at the airport at like 2 or 3 a.m. anyways. So we just stayed up and watched the Netflix show Brand New Cherry Flavor, just watched the whole season until like 4 a.m. And then I went to sleep and he left in an Uber.
That's bound to generate some
interesting dreams.
Interesting dreams.
I mean, it was a really good show, so we couldn't stop watching it. But yes, it was a very. I was so tired I stayed asleep. But yes, a very haunting show.
Yeah, being delirious watching that show, I imagine, is an interesting experience.
But not even sure what we're talking about anymore. Point is, when you're listening to this, I will be on vacation. There will, of course, still be content that we pre-prepared that we'll cut from this podcast. It'll be dropped throughout the week. It's a narrow chance I'll do a video while I'm in Costa Rica. My girlfriend may need to work one day as well, or half a day or something. And so, you never know. Depending on if I get some really interesting information about a product I've been told I might get information about, there's a chance it could be like a 10-minute video. But for the most part, I'll be on vacation. When I get back, the content will keep rolling out.
The content will flow once you're
back. The content tent will keep rolling rain off of the top of it. I don't know if that works. But let us move on to corrections here. Compressed AI Blocks writes in and he says, for Broken Silicon 282, the PS4 actually had 256 megabytes of RAM and then an ARM processor, yes, but it was for certain background tasks and sleep functions. It never handled the OS completely or other functions like it sounds like you alleged a couple episodes ago. Originally Sony, and I believe Xbox was like this as well, actually, reserved 2 out of the 8 cores for the OS and background operations, and that was eventually reduced to 1 out of 8. Well, actually on that one, I do distinctly remember there was an extra half a core. I don't even need a correction if I'm wrong. I don't care, people. But my memory was Sony reserved 2 cores for the operating system, and out of 8 of very weak cores for the PS4. And then the Xbox had to also reserve a 3rd core, or at least half of one, for Kinect. And so it also actually de facto had a weaker CPU, even though they tried to clock it faster. Now, over time, of course,
well, they got rid of the Kindle requirement. I mean, not Kindle, Kinect.
Over time, Microsoft decided to take Kinect around the back of the house and shoot it. And then Sony freed up more and more of the CPU and RAM actually as well for games. But my understanding, I actually double-checked this compressed AI blocks, is that it was used for some other OS features over time. Now, I don't know which ones or how many, but I believe, yes, of course, like if a certain amount of RAM of the PS4 is reserved for the OS, then for sure not all of it is being done on the ARM CPU. But the fact that they kept freeing it up, I feel like they did make more and more of the OS functions get handled by that ARM processor, though, and that is why the PS4, at least the base version, I think the Pro still relatively performs in the operating system like it always did, but it had more RAM. I think they did. That's why it became more sluggish, though. So I think our overall point that it became more sluggish because they offloaded more to the ARM CPU is true, but no, it was never everything. And I think I may have said that, which would be incorrect.
Yeah. I mean, that, or they just, I don't know, I guess if we're misremembering things, I don't know, maybe they just tried to make the OS more efficient and it really didn't get that much more efficient. And maybe too much crap was being handled by one core.
That's probably a bit of both, right? Yeah. Like paring down, making the OS more efficient, but then also trying to make the main CPU do as little as possible to and RAM really is the important one, to free up resources.
Yeah, because I do remember, and Sony does need to get better about this, and I think they are. Stop making your freaking consoles so sluggish at the end of the generation. Just,
well,
I don't know.
Well, like the PS3 was the really bad one. I mean, it basically became unusable by the end. Well into the PS4 gen, it became unusable because they just tried to make it use the PlayStation Store app, the same one the PS4 uses. But I do think, on the one hand, they probably will do that less moving forward, but it's probably because they have less direct competition is the reason they would. I mean, if we're being honest, there was, especially with the PS3 and 360, there was just this arms race to try to say Alan Wake looked better than Killzone or whatever. And like, I think that's why they were willing to compromise that, because in reviews, they could still claim Uncharted 3 best looking game or not.
Yeah.
And I think over time, over time, there'll be less pressure to do that for Sony, but also over time, it's just the latent performance is just higher. Like 5%, I don't know what it is, right? But like 10% of a PS5 CPU is better than is better than like the whole PS4 CPU or something. Like, it's probably not exactly that, but I think over time also, even if they do free up more resources, it's still the raw amount of resources is much more than what they were dealing with prior consoles that could kind of do everything, but it was like barely, not like now where the PS5 is like more than enough performance to run Netflix. I mean,
oh yeah, and I don't imagine you'll see a huge slowdown in the OS near the end of the PS5 generation. I mean, I've noticed no slowdown as of so far, although I don't think we're quite getting into that territory yet where Sony was really trying to push performance with the PS5.
Carbon Cry writes in, says, Tom, in the last Die Shrink, you yet again made fun of, dismissed, and demeaned Microsoft OneDrive. I think you're often mistaking OneDrive for BitLocker. Nope. BitLocker is bad. OneDrive is by far the best integrated cloud solution. Beg to differ. Ideal for anyone moving between desktop, laptop, work computer, and even phone. Especially Samsung has incredible OneDrive integration. Today, OneDrive is the one huge competitive advantage of Windows for me. The reason Windows remains my preferred OS. And remember, I grew up using Linux. Yeah, I don't think you're a fanboy. I just think OneDrive. So when I worked at General Motors and the company after that, OneDrive worked fine. I mean, for business. And depending on how you decide to use it, I'm sure it can be okay. But what I do know is that it almost destroyed my girlfriend's data from her PC. And I've seen way too many people, including Wendell, complain about how this works. And so I think for business, it's probably fine, but I think turning it on by default for consumer laptops or desktops is just a disaster, and it's just a way to try to trick you into having to buy more storage because they've hijacked your files and they're not where they're supposed to be on your PC, which breaks a lot of games compatibility when it's trying to reference things in folders that are now in the cloud for some stupid reason. So no, Carbon Cry, I do know what OneDrive is, and I think it and BitLocker suck.
Yeah, I mean, OneDrive, I've had similar issues that your girlfriend has had too. Like it completely screws with your file management. It like tries to subtly trick you into using it as the main thing you store things to, and then look at it has, I don't remember the exact limit that it has, but a limit that you can reach surprisingly quickly, and then
it's like
you're
5 gigabytes, I think.
yeah, and then it's like, you're screwed out. Now we want you to buy this, which is another thing that Microsoft keeps trying to do is turn Windows into a service video or a live service video game where every feature is behind some freaking paywall, like that they show you on your desktop. And OneDrive is part of that for me. Like, no, I really don't like OneDrive. Maybe I'm in the minority of people here, but I also think OneDrive sucks.
Yeah. And again, I don't think I really ever had issues with it when I used it for work, but I do have an issue with it in a lot of consumer devices that have it on by default, with, in my opinion, really stupid settings on by default. But all right, let us now move on to the first story here. Story number 1. Intel just admitted its Arrow Lake launch didn't go as planned and is promising fixes. First quote in here from Robert Halleck, Intel VP of Client AI and Technical Marketing. I can't go into all the details yet, but we've identified a series of issues, multi-factor. They're at the OS level, they're at the BIOS level. The launch just didn't go as planned, and that's been a humbling lesson for us all, and has kind of inspired a fairly large response internally. They get to the bottom of what happened and to fix it. I think the bones are solid. Arrow Lake, it is. I truly believe that it is fundamentally a good part. It delivers power consumption reductions that we really needed to make across our entire portfolio by now. I don't know. To me, it just seems like we're getting deja vu. Arrow Lake launched with similar issues as Ryzen 9000, to be fair, but they were arguably worse because Arrow Lake wasn't even 5% better than 14th gen at launch. It was a regression, and it also doesn't have 3D parts coming to redeem it in any way. Meanwhile, Intel's previous big launch, Meteor Lake, also launched in a very poor state. So it's hard to believe that this is just another fluke like Zen 5, considering it's worse than what happened with Zen 5. And we've already seen this before with the previous Ultra generation. So what's going on at Intel? Well, in the aforementioned live stream, Robert Halleck claimed that there was a matrix of possibilities in combination of BIOS and OS vectors, resulting in issues with high memory latency. See, but I was already warned about this and told half of it comes from the fact that it's using these tiles anyways. But continuing, Halleck also set a time frame for the fixes, answering to a question from Tom's Hardware editor, Paul Acorn, that some fixes will be in November or early December at the latest. At the same time, though, Intel's current best performing product, Raptor Lake, finally faces a class action. The class action complaint represents a specific case of a New York customer who bought an i7-13700K, had issues with instability, random crashes, and restarts, issues not even installing a patch for the 13th gen fix. Hopefully, Arrow Lake and its few users will only suffer at launch and not, like its predecessor, Raptor Lake, just a plain broken product forever. So there you go. I mean, I guess I didn't know what to expect of Intel's response here, but I guess they're claiming they're going to have patches. And you know, I don't know if you noticed, I rolled my eyes while I was reading the amount of times I've heard a company go, this has been humbling for us. Okay, sure. It's always humbling. But go on.
The one thing I guess I will give, and it's the slightest degree of of credit, is at least they're finally acknowledging that a problem exists when a problem obviously exists. I don't really know if I want to believe them when they say that these are temporary performance issues. Like, how long have you guys been testing this for? How is this such a shocker that like it's not performing to the standard you wanted to meet? Like it kind of doesn't make sense to me. And as I've said in the past, I don't really trust much of what Intel says at this point. So, okay, you say you're going to fix it. Show me what you got. Is it now better almost across the board than the 4900K in performance? Because if it's not, it's like, good job, I guess. AMD's last generation is still better than your current one. Like,
Not to
cool.
mention the newer one.
Yeah.
Compressed AI Blocks writes in, Tom, Intel announced there will be an Arrow Lake fix for gaming coming within a month. Say, as a hypothetical, that the inconsistencies and instabilities are gone, okay, and then it gains 5 to 10% across their stack in gaming. What price would the 245K, 265K, and 285K have to be to attract them now? Will they ultimately still have to have severe price cuts, do you think? Yeah, I do, because, look, I actually looked this up, of course, before we started recording, Dan. In the TechSpot, which is Hardware Unboxed, the 9800X3D beats the 285K in gaming by 35% on average in 1080p. So I don't know what patches they got coming, what BIOS updates, but I doubt it's going to improve performance by 35%. And they're still down 5%, according to Tech Power Up, in average application performance. So they would need a patch that's at least 10% across the board. And even then, we'd have a narrow application performance win and still a pretty horrible defeat in gaming, still really being comparable to Zen 4 in gaming at that point. And therefore, it still needs price cuts because AMD's done price cuts. I mean, I haven't checked what it is now, but typically you're finding the 950X, I believe, for under 600. You know, you're finding the 9900X, which is becoming something I'm going to recommend more and more now, for like $400, 450 or something. And with that in mind, I can't help but think that I think the 285K needs to be like, I don't know, $500. The Ultra 7 needs to be 400. The Ultra 5 below 300, because the Ultra 5, again, remember, if they were to improve gaming performance by 10% for the 285K, okay, great, but that still puts the i5, which is clocked slower, at, I mean, right now there's some games where it's trading blows with Zen 3. So yeah, I think 300, 400, 500 would still have to be the prices, because they'd still be behind the competition half of the time, especially if you're not talking about the Ultra 9. The Ultra 7 and 5 are even slower. And AMD's cut prices. So I just don't think there's really a way to truly salvage this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if they get a meager performance, and like I shouldn't say meager, realistic of like 5 to 10%. I don't know. The 285K is probably justified a little bit above the 9800X3D, like maybe. And I don't know. Everything else still needs to be cheaper. Like you said, everything needs. I think the 245 maybe needs a like $80 haircut, and the other two need like a $100 cut in price at least. Like, I don't understand how they're priced at what they're at now, on Newegg at $630, but that's entirely too expensive in my opinion.
And the only reason they're even remotely holding that price is because it's been a paper launch, so there's like almost none of them for sale.
Yeah, so like even if they make things better than what they are now, I still think they need to be cheaper than what they are now. I guess no one is buying them, and there's no stock available, though. So they can keep that whatever $630 price point for the 8 people or whoever that actually want to buy a 285K.
Well, and let's, call a spade on this one. We don't need, like, yes, theoretically, were it to be this good and that to do that, it would be fair if it was this. Let's remove just pretending everyone watches the latest news and evaluates things perfectly fairly. That's not what most people do. They look at day one reviews, and I don't think I've seen day one reviews this bad in my life. I mean, honestly, they came off worse than Bulldozer reviews, or at least there's less apologizing for Intel than people were, I think, unfairly apologizing for Bulldozer. Don't apologize for it. It sucks.
Yeah, well, part of that is just Intel has been annoying now for several years, and I don't know, AMD
and the instability. Bulldozer worked.
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't unstable.
It's just like when Bulldozer came out, they were still coming off of AMD having a decent amount of goodwill towards the market. I mean, the market having goodwill for AMD, and here it's just, well, this is after 6 months of you guys. Actually, probably more than 6 months at this point, like 8 months to 10 months of them pretending there isn't an issue with Raptor Lake, and people are tired of it.
Right. This was the worst time for this to happen because it's following a generation that lost a lot of trust for them. So I think you could remove Zen 5. Like, I think I've said this, like Zen 5 could not exist, and AMD's going to outsell Intel because of the goodwill they've lost. And now they've lost again with Arrow Lake, and Zen 4 is cheap. So remove Zen 5 from the equation, they would need to do price cuts anyways with how bad this launch has been. So again, to answer the question, 10% wouldn't be enough to really make a crazy difference, and AMD is already cheaper. Yeah, it's going to need drastic price cuts. It just will.
Yeah.
Like at a minimum for any amount, for them to defend any of their do-it-yourself market share, it needs to be plus 10%, no instability and price cuts. Dark Helmet writes in, is there any indication that the lack of hyperthreading on Arrow Lake's P cores is hampering gaming performance? Yeah, I tried to look around a little bit before we started recording. I mean, maybe you could argue some of the games that use more than 8 threads seem to maybe perform worse, but that's one of those things where you would need someone to like really, really, really investigate and really know what they're doing, like Wendell and Hardware Unbox and Gamers Nexus, like really know which games leverage what. And even then APO can be used to use the E-cores with it sometimes. I can't conclusively say that yet. Looking around though, it kind of seemed to me like games that use a lot of threads seem to fare worse. So maybe there's some evidence, but is it just because those games also have latency issues or more latency sense? I don't know. So
I mean, yeah, it makes sense if it goes over 8 cores that it would
8 threads.
Yeah, sorry, 8 threads. It would hurt performance a little bit, but I don't know. I think the dust needs to settle a little bit. Like they say they have fixes coming soon. Hopefully those are to some extent real. And then you need somebody that has a lot of hardware and time to do this testing, to actually do the testing to prove it. Because I'm sure those videos are coming.
Yeah, like we need to isolate all of the issues first. And once those are fixed or allegedly fixed, then we need to isolate exactly what games we think could even test this.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let us now move on to story number 2. AMD cuts workforce. First quoting CRN and then doing some editorialization on the end here. AMD is laying off roughly 4% of its global workforce to focus on its largest growth opportunities, which includes its efforts to challenge Nvidia's AI chip dominance. AMD told CRN, as part of aligning our resources with our largest growth opportunities, we are taking a number of targeted steps that will unfortunately result in reducing our global workforce by approximately 4%. We are committed to treating impacted employees with respect and helping them through this transition, the representative added. Now, AMD's layoffs may seem minor on the surface, considering it's just 4%, but based on information that I have received from sources, these layoffs are very targeted and making some people very mad. The semi-custom and gaming division has been hit especially hard, I am told, with cuts of up to 10% there. After all, as AMD said, they are aligning our resources with our largest growth opportunities. And if you look at gaming revenue, it's been pretty bad, especially with Xbox imploding for semi-custom, and then GPU sales just across the board pretty much being down right now. So semi-custom and gaming have been underperforming, and I guess that would make sense why there's more layoffs there to focus more on AI. But I must report that people tell me this has damaged morale at AMD very badly, that the people, especially in like especially in the semi-custom, in the gaming division with GPUs, I think a lot of people there are like,
expected.
Yeah, they're like, well, if we're making less GPUs, dies for RDNA 4, it kind of makes sense to reduce headcount 10%. It's whatever. But in the semi-custom, they're pretty mad. They're like, are you kidding me? The PS5, Xbox were executed well. The PS5 Pro is a home run. Steam Deck's a success. Are you really reducing headcount here? We're probably going to need more semi-custom. And at the same time, I've heard people in the CPU divisions at AMD going, good, they weren't pulling their slack. So I don't know. This has increased divisions between several parts of the company, which I already heard there was some tribalism there, and I don't like to hear that. So yeah, I'm just reporting. I've heard this is really worse than AMD's making it out to be. Like you would expect, these companies always try to sugarcoat these types of things. Yeah. And it doesn't make me worry about the future of AMD GPUs or anything, but it does make me worry about their ability to catch up to NVIDIA as quickly as we would hope they would. So,
yeah, I mean, if they're cutting gaming or their GPU division or their gaming GPU division, yeah, that says to me, well, we're kind of putting this on the back burner for a little bit.
Again, it's 10%. It's not like Intel, who cut half of their GPU people. So let's put things in perspective.
I'm not trying to allege that they're about to not make GPUs anymore, but
I have heard of people, remember a year ago in NVIDIA GeForce complaining they're not getting enough funding. So this kind of seems to be an industry-wide thing.
Yeah, well, with that, like, I mean, it just seems to me that AMD might not try to take the performance crown for a couple generations. Who knows? And to that point you made about GeForce, I don't know. It does speak to the thing that I fear about the hardware market, where they might be realigning too hard towards AI, and that's going to look pretty stupid in a few years when there's a burst in the bubble. But if AMD wants to be competitive in AI, like truly competitive against Nvidia, they need to get in now while the iron's still kind of hot.
Mm-hmm.
And then with semi-custom, I don't know. That kind of sucks in my opinion for them. Like, I think
They've hit home runs with the PS5, Xbox, Steam
I
Deck. I mean,
I think from AMD's point of view, they should view all of those as successes, even if the Xbox isn't doing that well. I mean, the PS5 is doing great, and like you said, the Steam Deck is doing great. I don't know what else I guess is in that department, but I mean, the last real thought I have on this is the emergence of tribalism, which it's a big corporation. I guess there's going to be tribes in every company, but hopefully that's not a proto where Intel is right now. What's happening at AMD? Although that wouldn't show itself for a decade, I don't think, or the better part of a decade at least, if that's what's happening.
yeah, I mean, to be fair to AMD, if these reports I've heard are true, let's be honest, that they might be thinking is, look, Xbox says they're making more consoles, but and this I reported this at the last minute, they canceled the Xbox
Mhm.
Series X Elite or whatever the heck they were going to call it. Um, and it took them forever to switch to 6 nanometer for the Xbox Series S die shrinked edition. So AMD might be looking at Xbox and going, look, even if they keep making more consoles, it looks like they're going to make half as many and they suck to deal with. So why wouldn't we reduce our headcounts in a division by
True.
10% if like one of our main customers is clearly kind of getting out of the business? From that perspective, I get it. From the gaming and from the gaming side, maybe they're like, look, we're not going to need this many employees on GPU until RDNA 5 launches. That's in a year. That's in like 2 years, a year and a half at least. So we want the money elsewhere. So I would
Yeah.
just remind people, if it was 30%, I'd go, this is very bad. If it's 10%, they don't need as many people to make Xboxes anymore. They don't need as many people to make big RDNA 4. For now, it's logical. I just don't like how they're handling it, because from what it sounds like, it's not like they did 5% in just the underperforming employees. They just gutted 10% they thought they didn't need, even the
Mhm.
people that were overperforming in some cases, I've heard. Well, not over, but the people performing well.
Yeah. I mean, it does suck. Like, but I don't know. I feel like everybody has at least secondhand experienced this in some way. Like, you
Sure.
have a parent, a friend, your spouse, whatever. They just get laid off at their company. They were doing fine, and it's just the accountant saw that this wasn't worth keeping this job, and that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't really have much more to say, but I would bring that up again, though. I reported a year ago that in people working on NVIDIA drivers were mad they couldn't expand their team fast enough, and they blame part of the Starfield issues on that.
Hmm.
And so the way I would summarize it is, yes, AMD has cut some of the gaming, but let's put things in perspective. AXG has gutted the graphics card
Yeah.
team. NVIDIA hasn't fired people, but they're not increasing their budget really in a company that has a ballooning budget. So relatively speaking, they are underfunding gaming, and AMD's cut it by 10%.
Hmm.
It seems to be an industry-wide thing to not focus on graphics right now. Like, let's just be honest.
That might just not be where all the money is being made right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, AI is huge.
All right, let us then move on to story number 3. All right, reports of panic buying emerge as Trump tariffs loom. All right, here's the write-up. It is a fact. The 9800 X3D launched with heavy volume. European retailers like Mind Factory advertise piles of 9800 X3Ds on Twitter. At Micro Center in the US, dozens of 9800 X3Ds are verifiably, because they show you the stock online,
Hmm.
in stock at many locations to this day. And the 9800 X3D still, and I checked before we started recording, remains number one on Amazon. You can't be number one bestseller unless there was the stock to sell. So the stock is there. However, it just wasn't enough in some regions, and it is selling out, and scalpers are taking advantage of it, especially outside the United States. And while demand is a major main reason for it being hard to get in some regions, there seems to be another much more concerning factor going on here. Panic buying like it's 2021 all over again. You see, this channel leaked last week that while sources within all markets I spoke with did at least have enough stock for a mediocre to decent launch, markets outside the US definitely received significantly less stock than the United States received. And distributors that I spoke with in the United States noted that there was panic buying going on by US companies. And it's not just panic buying of the 9800 X3D. My sources reported panic buying of all PC components by all US companies to the point that we're already seeing shipping rates climb. Shipping rates have, to be fair, already been going up this year due to Red Sea attacks, but we see a new uptick. And shipping analysts predict a 13.6% increase in shipped tonnage this November compared to November of 2023. So we've seen actions across the Pacific with PC Partner Group as well, the second largest GPU AIB. They make Zotac, NOD, 3D, and others, are now also moving from Hong Kong to Singapore to avoid tariffs. So there you go. Yes, the 9800 X3D is harder to get outside the US, but it's not because of a lack of volume. It's because AMD is trying to push as much stock, especially resupplies, by the way, it seems, into the US as quickly as possible before possible tariffs kick in. This is happening with many other companies too. And I must admit that I also suspect that the incredibly high volume for the PS5 Pro in the US might be for similar reasons. So my advice, if you are in the US and you want to build a PC in the next 6 months, this would probably apply to anyone on Earth, actually, consider doing it now. This influx is pushing down prices short term because they're flooding the market to take advantage of non-tariffs right now. But long term, things could get a lot worse. So, and again, since then, by the way, I've put this past other people I talk with in retail and distribution. They all say it. Doesn't matter who it is, Best Buy, Micro Center, Amazon, they are stocking up on things like CPUs, SSDs, because they think there could be tariffs and they want to have them in warehouses before that happens.
I mean, yeah, I would echo your sentiment. If you're planning on building something, do it now. I mean, I think to look a little bit optimistically, hopefully tariffs don't kick in immediately. I'd be surprised if they happen.
I doubt that, yeah.
I'd be surprised if they happen within the first 2 months, but
of next year, yeah.
Yeah. I would be surprised if there are tariffs by the end of March next year, but who knows when it could happen. That's what they're going to push for. And PC parts are going to be among the most affected. Everything is manufactured in Taiwan and or China.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe they'll do a specific cutout for Taiwan, hopefully, but I wouldn't bet on parts staying cheap.
No, and I think you'll get cutouts. Tim Cook is really good at buttering up Trump. Tim Apple. Yeah, we should call him Tim Apple now again. Is really good at buttering up Trump, but and that's what's expected by a lot of analysts is there will be some tariffs, and then who can make him happy enough to give their company a carve out. But I could see maybe PlayStation and Sony getting that, Apple, Samsung, a small SSD company. I don't think so. Because they don't have the money to lobby the president. So who does that affect? Do it yourself, probably the most. You know what I mean? Because there's all these little niche parts coming from all of these companies, and I don't know how many of them will be able to lobby this. So especially when it comes to do it yourself, this should be a very real concern for people, I think. And I was a little surprised to see how much this is happening. I thought some people would be like, oh, that's not true. But everyone I've asked, it's happening. There's panic buying.
I mean, call it panic. It seems pretty rational to
sure
try to keep up stock right now, or get the stock while it's cheap. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to add to this. I think it makes sense, and if you want to buy now, if you can.
Deadeyes 117 writes in and says, Tom and Dan, I highly doubt this will happen, but I'm just curious on your thoughts. With the looming potential for tariffs on foreign goods in the U.S., is it possible that Intel might have an advantage over AMD by having more domestic production? I know they are leaning heavily into TSMC this generation and probably next generation, and who knows, maybe forever. But depending on how the tariffs go, do you see a possibility of Intel domestic products being artificially well priced against AMD imports? So it depends again on the carve outs. Does Pat Gelsinger butter up Trump in the right ways. He seems good at it too, to be honest. Maybe he will. But I think people are just missing how global Intel is. One of their most advanced foundries is in Ireland. That's where Meteor Lake's coming from, people, not the United States. And they still rely on components from all over the world. And I think this is something you see way too often in mainstream reporting in the United States and globally. It's just like, well, remember, this is made here. And it's like, no, the PlayStation, the APU is made in Taiwan, and then everything else comes from China and every other place in the world. Like, no, like everything pulls from parts and supplies, and like the silicon itself, the sand itself, it's from all over the world. This would affect everyone. And if there's retaliatory tariffs, and there almost always are, I mean, this will just up the prices it just up the prices for everything.
Well, yeah, like you said, it's a global economy. Look where everything comes from. I mean, if people remember back in 2022, that was a big thing of discussion. If like the war in Ukraine could up prices of silicon because Ukraine happens to be one of the bigger exporters of helium, which is important for manufacturing. So yeah, this, like you said, this could have hard to predict knock-on effects due to how global manufacturing a piece of sand is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, maybe.
Or the other parts around the PCB, the heat spreader. Where does that metal come from? Is it actually mass-produced in China for this line, but the other line, they produce it in America? You mentioned the war in Ukraine. I mean, grain prices went up, and it's like, but the U.S. has plenty of grain. Right, but if there's less worldwide, they're gonna charge more.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure the conversation right now is happening at Intel, like, should we fast track trying to move production back to America for their chips? But I don't know how much that will, at the end of the day, affect the price of their chips. And
well, and how fast can a fast track be? I think all too often people are like, well, let's move something whatever. And it's like, you understand, it'll take like 3 years. So
yeah, who knows how long they're still stuck on TSMC for if they want to get off quickly, which I don't know. In all other situations, I think staying on TSMC would be fine, but who knows now?
Techno writes in and says, how much supply did Europe and the UK get of the 9800X 3D? Well, America has loads left if you check online. It seems to be completely out of stock in the UK. I mean, right, so let me see here. Oh, I accidentally combined my response to him there. But he says, I don't have an exact number, but more than usual. Once you account for customs issues, which that was a thing a lot of people overlooked, is some massive shipment of 9800X 3Ds were stuck in UK customs. But at this, I mean, I saw people online saying I got one. It didn't seem like an Ampere situation where one person on Reddit had one in the r/Nvidia and everyone else was like, what? And it's like literally just one or two. So it wasn't a paper launch. I keep hearing this from everyone. It was not a paper launch. It was a pretty typical launch in Europe. I mean, anecdotally, and it is kind of anecdotal, but I get the feeling that there was plenty of stock in Eastern Europe compared to usual for the 9800X3. I don't know why that would be, but there was. And that the UK got hit harder than most of the EU for a multitude of factors, including that customs issue. But it still seemed like a pretty typical launch in most regions, a crazy high volume launch in the United States, and a lighter launch in the UK because of the customs issues. But once that's solved, a mediocre launch. Like high volume EU, mediocre UK, super high in the US. Is how I would characterize it. Sheriff Lotfi writes in and says, I don't see why Mini should go to Zen 5 as a whole with the way things are now. Unless, of course, you wish to rid yourself of the problems of Zen 4. I don't know what those were. Would you recommend that people wait for Zen 6? And do you have any information on how powerful Zen 6 will be compared to Zen 5? Oh, there's been a multitude of Zen 6 leaks out of this channel. I don't even know if I'm going to put a specific one up. Just search Zen 6 on Moore's Law is Dead, especially the Medusa one. But yeah, I mean, at a minimum, I've seen 10% higher IPC as the target since leaking that. I've been told that they're redoing the memory controller, basically. So I kind of expect like a Zen 5 like performance uplift. We'll see what that means. Will it mean 20% in application, 5% in gaming again? I don't know. It might be 15 and 15, 10 and 10. I don't know what it will be. But I expect at least a Zen 5 level increase for gaming, which is exciting, and maybe more cores. But would I wait for Zen 6? I mean, again, this question of waiting, it's like we've kind of told you not to just now.
Yeah, like I was about to just say, I mean, this thing we just talked about, like, if you're thinking about upgrading, no, I wouldn't wait till Zen 6. I would get Zen 4 if that's not what you're already on, or Zen 5, or like a 9800 X3D. So I don't know. I think the two CPUs to get right now are the 7800 or the 9800 X3D if they're available to you. And then there's a laundry list of other CPUs that I would recommend below that too. But
yeah. And remember, Zen 6, it's going to become, I've leaked that, it's going to be compatible with AM5. So I don't think there's really as much of a worry. I mean, get a 9800 X3D now if you can. If you can't, I mean, look, the 9700X, it's, like what, 25, 30% weaker in gaming, 20, 30%, let's say. And it's that much cheaper at least. I mean, they're going for like $300 right now. I mean, just get a 9700X, call it a day. And then when Zen 6 comes out, you'll at least be able to sell that, I bet, on the used market for $150. And, whatever, you spent $150 more than you would have net and had this for a year or two. I'd say don't wait at this point if you need it. If you don't, our advice is always probably to wait. Okay, now let us move on then to story number 4. All right, let's see here. I just titled the summary of Nvidia APU leaks because I've been like trickling out leaks of that new APU Nvidia's got coming. So first I'm going to quote Tweaktown reporting on my stuff and then just add on to it. Here we go. Nvidia is developing its first consumer APU with gaming performance that is comparable to a 65-watt RTX 4070 laptop GPU and targeting AMD's upcoming Strix Halo APU roughly in performance and capabilities overall. This ARM-based processor aims to launch in thin and light laptops within a couple of years with a power of up to 80 watts total. That's right. From our sources, we learned key details of an APU Nvidia hopes to push out by the end of 2025 or at a minimum in 2026. That surprised me a lot, by the way. I always heard probably 26. Seems like they want to beat Soundwave from AMD, which is an ARM APU, to the market and be able to compete with the first Halo edition, not Medusa, but actually Strix Halo. And it should basically be 4070 laptop performance for the GPU, a CPU that's decent, but unlikely to beat what Strix Halo has using off-the-shelf-ish ARM cores, but maybe consume 20% less power and have a powerful NPU. So yeah, expect a little bit lower performance overall than Strix Halo, but lower power. And if someone can fix Windows on ARM, it's probably NVIDIA. So yeah, what did you think about this? I did a live stream where I leaked a lot of these details. And I dropped some more during the NX Gamer Broken Silicon.
I mean, I think having a new entrant into the market for CPU and is kind of important, and this is at least a signal that that's where Nvidia is going. With Intel flailing, Qualcomm being kind of lackluster, we need something. And if they can deliver this by the end of 2025, I think that will look pretty good. I mean, pretty good. If it's gets pushed to like later 2026, it's going to be kind of underwhelming. But
I think so, yeah.
If it performs, or I shouldn't say performs well, if it doesn't have a lot of the ARM bugs that Qualcomm had, it should. I think it will be great if it's correctly placed at the right price points, which Nvidia has a history of being bad at that. But I don't know. We can cross our fingers.
Yeah, and this would be a good time to plug that we just did a die shrink. Of course, you get access to that for just $2 a month at the lowest tier Patreon, where me and you talked about what we wanted and answered questions from patrons about what they expect and want out of the Nvidia APU. And it's funny, I believe, and tell me if your opinion is not what I'm characterizing here, but at least for me, I started the episode thinking, look, it's Nvidia. They're probably going to charge a bunch of money and pretend it's an Apple APU. Mm-hmm. But then I realized, well, they're partnering with Alienware. That's for gamers. And Nvidia knows that their greatest mindshare is GeForce. I kind of, over the course of the episode, convinced myself that actually maybe they won't overcharge for this. If it had RTX 4090 performance, I'd go, oh, they're shooting for M4 Ultra pricing and stuff.
Yeah.
But they're not. It's 4070 launching as soon as possible. And again, laptop 4070, so 4060 Ti. And most OEMs I've spoke with expect it to just barely underperform Strix Halo's GPU. But we'll see. When I hear that, I go, I don't know, maybe NVIDIA is planning to launch some $1,000 to $1,500 mid-range gaming APU. like that would be the way to enter the market.
Yeah, and if they're only going to achieve 4060 Ti desktop performance or get close to Strix Halo, and
Maybe even just 4060 desktop if it's,
yeah,
like a 65 watt 4070 laptop.
and with a CPU that's probably kind of lackluster for a lot of applications, but is good enough for gaming with a GPU that powerful, they really can't justify a super high price point. I'm not saying it's going to be like $600, but I can't imagine it would be more than 12, maybe 1300 for most models. Like
For it to succeed.
yeah. So that's what I'm hoping. And if there's a lot of bug fixes or there's fewer, I should probably just say fewer compatibility issues because that's generally the issue. If there's fewer compatibility issues than Qualcomm has, or crossing my fingers, they just get rid of them or mostly eliminate
They just
them.
don't show up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this could be a really good first generation for NVIDIA partnering on an APU. So I don't know. I'm somewhat hopeful, and I don't necessarily love that NVIDIA might be the next big entrant into the CPU market just because of how big of a company they are. But competition is better than no competition.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is, well, let me throw this in first. Techno writes in, with NVIDIA's ARM project coming out in late 2025, you kept comparing it to Strix Halo. However, if Intel is just downplaying Panther Lake because they don't want any more overhype, I don't know about that, like they had for Meteor Lake and Arrow Lake, could it lead to Zen 6 being pulled in closer? How well would Medusa Halo compete with this NVIDIA APU? I haven't confirmed performance yet, but I've heard some wild things. I think Medusa Halo is going to be a lot faster than Strix Halo. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's another reason they're probably trying to launch this as soon as possible. If they can launch this half a year before Medusa Halo comes out, then I think this can do okay. But I think they know that Medusa Halo would crush this thing.
Yeah, and if it were to come out close to or just before around when like Medusa Halo comes out, I don't think it would get terrible reviews just because it's the first of a new thing. But I don't think there would be great glowing reviews for it because it will
Not unless
probably
they use like half the energy or
yeah.
something.
If it's way more efficient than what we're hearing now, sure. But if this is what it is and it releases against Medusa Halo, it's probably nothing other than good job, sport. You'll do better next time.
Yeah, which I don't think NVIDIA, I think Jensen's someone who likes to hear good job sport.
He heard that once when he was 8, and he's been traumatized by it for the entirety of his life.
probably something like that with these types. But yeah, I mean, and I think, the more we talked about it too, it's like in that die shrink we just put out, it's just obvious, like NVIDIA's looking and seeing Intel's laptop market share look very precarious. AMD is launching a flurry of APUs every year, going for it hard. And Qualcomm's fallen flat so far, but laid some of the groundwork for Windows on ARM working. I think NVIDIA realizes now, because we cannot let AMD take the entire laptop market, because they might take 80% of it over the next 4 years if NVIDIA isn't there right away. And again, even if AMD takes most of the laptop, like, consumer market, I think NVIDIA is going, yeah, but if Intel's collapsing, even if we get 10, 20% of that pie, that's great revenue growth for us.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why they want to do it as soon as possible. PERTDBN writes, and it says, I'm skeptical of NVIDIA's chances of making Windows on ARM work. As I'm sure previously pointed out before, Microsoft had more than 10 years to get Windows on ARM working well. Meanwhile, we have not seen any signs of it working well with Qualcomm as they stumbled into the market. In comparison, Valve released Proton in 2018. And in 3 years, gaming on Linux improved tremendously, so that when Valve announced the Steam Deck in 2021, I knew even by then that at least the software behind it should work well. And there's just never been a successful proof of concept yet for Windows on ARM working, especially in gaming, when half of Qualcomm's games list are lies, which is, to remind people, Qualcomm has a list of games that work well. Half of them don't, with some of the devs saying, take my game off that list. But he says there's a silver lining, though. AI researchers and hobbyists will love this thing because it will run stuff they always used to run with CUDA. For professionals, this APU should allow them to have an actual portable AI workstation with reasonable power efficiency and let them run CUDA on a bare metal without relying on cloud computing. It will be a true AI PC, trademark symbol. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point as well, and something where I do not expect their CPU and the APU to be remotely as powerful as Strix Halo.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as it doesn't get in the way, I think that's a really compelling argument is, hey, man, we got NVIDIA in an APU with a great NPU. And if you're a if you're a developer, if you're compiling a lot of stuff, writing a lot of code, ARM works fine right now. This is your AI development PC. So I think there really is an avenue here that into getting some level of success, even if it's not perfect, in a way that Qualcomm just didn't have any argument.
Yeah.
There was no reason to go to Qualcomm for anything except it should be cheaper or use less energy. They don't have any of the AI or NVIDIA brand recognition that NVIDIA has.
Yeah, and to his point about like, well, Proton improved over 3 years. I mean, that's a software thing, so that I think you are more likely to see gradual improvement over time. Whereas there's only so many hardware releases every year, and we don't really have a trend line yet to see how much better it's getting. It's getting as this big push by Microsoft is happening. So I think it's fair to be skeptical of new product or companies getting into trying to get into new markets. The last 2 times it happened, it's kind of been a wet fart, but there's always the first time that it works. So I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't bet Nvidia is going to be dominant in CPUs in 3 years, obviously, but a modest success I don't think would be shocking, which is kind of what I'm expecting.
Mm-hmm. Melodic Warrior writes in, he says, read Die Shrink 138. NVIDIA working on Linux would be a feasible possibility, I actually think. This is something that I've seen discussed a lot in the Moore's Law Said Discord. Is like, what if NVIDIA actually launches their own edition of Ubuntu or something and just sidesteps Windows because they know it doesn't work? But as I've spoken directly with an NVIDIA employee that showed me portions of their source code library, they actually run everything native on Ubuntu and Arc. From what I was told, it has been that way for more than 10 years. So yeah, maybe they are laying the groundwork for 2 editions of it. Hey, the ARM on Windows have Fun Edition, or actually we've optimized a distro of Linux for NVIDIA.
Yeah, and the only way I could imagine that working, though, and I think we discussed that a little bit on the Die Shrink, is like NVIDIA would really need to push their distro hard, because there is how many decades now of brand recognition for Windows? Like 30 years? Or I don't remember when the first distro of Windows came out, but that's been synonymous with PCs for like my entire life. I mean, the first home computer we had was an IBM computer, but it's been Windows ever since then. Windows or Macs ever since then.
Yeah. And hey, nothing's going to make me root for NVIDIA harder than if they actually start making real competition against Windows here. I mean, nothing on earth would. I'd be like, go NVIDIA. Techno writes in, could NVIDIA use the next Switch Tegra as an i3 or i5 competitor if NVIDIA goes into APUs? Now, if it came out 2 years ago, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure. Like if it was an 8 nanometer kind of Steam Deck performance APU, yeah, I think that would have been great in like $500 laptops 2 years ago, but it's just been too long. It's outdated. Like, they would be better to just make their own. And I've heard they're working on several APUs, like some working with MediaTek, but then also working on their own premium and mid-range versions. So they're going to make their own version. The time for them to do that would have been when it was actually, what is it? Not relative. I'll just say when it was actually relevant architectures, not Ampere Plus. And I mean, it's just too outdated by now. And also, I would say, from what I mean, Nintendo doesn't like it when you use their stuff for anything.
Oh,
so no. I don't think for that reason alone it would have happened.
For those reasons, you're out.
For those reasons, you're out. For those reasons, I'm out. Carmen Cry writes in, what does an NVIDIA APU mean for the possibility of Intel using NVIDIA GPU tiles? Will this be an obstacle to that possibility that we've discussed before, or will NVIDIA provide GPU to Intel similar to their partnership with MediaTek? I would definitely say this suggests that NVIDIA doesn't expect to be providing tiles to Intel in the next 2 years.
Yeah, but I mean, these companies are competitors. If a good deal for a partnership comes along, I don't know why NVIDIA would say no. I just don't think that's where it's going, and I think Intel is going to keep using their GPU tiles in house for, I don't know, at least another couple generations, right?
I think so for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think this would tell you that uh, not that much really, Carbon Cry, because yeah, like you said, Dan. I mean, I could see Nvidia making their own APUs and selling tiles to Intel at the same time. I mean, well, why not? But at the same time, if they are rushing this out this quickly, this tells you short term their intention is just to take market share from
Yeah.
Intel. All right, let's see here. So let us now move on to story number 5. Nvidia reportedly winding down RTX 40 series production, quoting first from board channels. According to the latest news from upstream Intel sources, Nvidia has completely withdrawn the 8106 production line. It's for the 4060, everybody. And, well, no, 4060 Ti. And the production capacity has been fully transferred to the RTX 50 series production line, with only the 8107 line temporarily retained for the 4060. Therefore, the RTX 40 series GPU has entered the final quarter of inventory clearance, and the RTX 40 mid to high-end series GPU has gradually stopped production and supply, which I've reported that they've already ended production on the top end, and switching has been accelerated. So there you go. Although, do not forget that this channel has reported NVIDIA was shipping Blackwell into the US in November as well, in anticipation of avoiding tariffs as well next year. I believe I leaked that. God, what was it? It was during one of the recent loose ends. I think the one where I leaked Panther Lake details. So I have to say this. I have heard that NVIDIA is already right now shipping in Blackwell, that they were always going to, whether they launch it this year or not. And at a minimum, I've got to say, I expect RDNA 4 and Blackwell, if not to have a paper launch in December or maybe a real launch out of nowhere, who knows? I bet they rush out a launch in January. I bet they do.
Yeah, I mean, we've been covering this for a while, and this plays into our coverage over the last several years, honestly. Like, there was a huge overproduction of RDNA 2 and Ampere. Don't want that to happen again. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this generation is a lot more like turning off one valve and turning on another. Except with, like maybe the 4060, which will the 4060 successor will probably be one of, if not the last thing to launch. So sure.
Right. So they might as well make it a little longer.
Keep that going a little while longer. That's also, I would suspect, supposed to be a high volume thing, although in this market, I don't know what is high volume anymore.
It kind of feels like the 70 is the 60 now.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. And just don't bet on Lovelace being on the market for 1,000 years after after the generation is over, like we saw with Ampere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially because, again, I've leaked this. There was plans at first to have Blackwell, I believe, be at least half, if not all, 3 nanometer. Then it switched to mostly 4 nanometer. Then, and I don't know what it was. I don't remember anymore. 6 months ago or more, they was just like, it's probably about a year ago. They decided all 4 nanometer. So this is something kind of like Zen 4 to Zen 5, where they can pretty effortlessly just say, now make this, because it's almost the same node. Effectively, it is in terms of like the resources used and kind of with the contract. So yeah, I really don't expect Lovelace to be around that long. I've already leaked that high end is done. Now it seems that the low end is being wound down. And I mean, yeah, I think we'll just have to see. But I don't think it really matters whether Blackwell and RDNA 4 launch in December or if they launch in January. I mean, look, we're more than halfway through November as of when this episode will come out. And it still, to me, feels like if there's a launch this year, it's going to be a very rushed, papery thing. And
yeah,
what they're really going to aim to do is probably tease or show it off and announce a CES launch. But I'm really suspecting it's going to be a big launch. I get the feeling, because of the worry about tariffs, probably both AMD and Nvidia, and as we'll get to soon, maybe even Intel, are going to go, no, it really is launching for like first half of January, and we're going to try to shove everything out in 1 month so that and so that it's both before the Chinese New Year, but also before tariffs are possibly implemented. So we'll see. There might just really be a rush for the door in trying to get your GPU Q1 of this year. That's kind of what of 2025. That's kind of what I'm expecting.
Well, yeah. I mean, and if they wanted a big launch this year, we would have needed the launch like 2 weeks ago. It can't be this year anymore. So I guess big January launch. Hopefully they're not rushing, and hopefully it's not very buggy, but that's what that could be building towards.
Well, on that note, I can't speak for Nvidia. Maybe I should ask about this, but I can say that I've been told that RDNA 4 is pretty much done. So I'm not really worried about it being buggy right now.
Well,
And in fact, it's technically out in the PS5 Pro to a certain degree.
Yeah,
So
and there's only 2 dies this time around, so and AMD is at least saying that they're becoming a software company, so hopefully these issues become less common with them.
yeah, and so again, I just bringing up shopping advice. I wouldn't hesitate to build the PC now. And if you see a 7900 XT for 600 or less, a 7800 XT, I've seen those for like $400 sometimes. I don't think you're beating 7800 XT for $400 with RDNA 4. But if you're looking for anything above the 7900 XT, I really wouldn't buy now, though.
Yeah,
and I would just have your money in your bank account for January to buy up. It's a really weird time where it's like timing the market is actually a thing. But I just, yeah, if you're getting a 4080 Super or a 4090, I just think you're going to feel pretty silly after this stuff comes out. But if you're buying a low end card, no, I mean, look, they've even said they're going to keep making the 4060 for the time being. I mean, if you see a good deal on that now, getting that and throwing that in some discount Zen system before prices go up is I think, a very wise decision. All right. Let us now continue the GPU discussion with story number 6. Some sort of Battlemage launch is apparently happening in December. This has been rumored for a bit, but a couple of days ago, Tomasz Gawronski on Twitter leaked what appears to be marketing materials that indicate Intel is doing some sort of launch or reveal of Battlemage in December of this year. And I actually have a quote here that I'm going to read. I can also independently confirm this. One of my best sources reached out to me over the weekend and said, by the way, I was just notified that Intel will be briefing people about Battlemage before the end of November in preparation for some sort of launch happening in December. They really want to be able to claim they didn't fail their roadmap. And so, yeah, I mean, some sort of launch or claimed launch is going to happen in December. However, I do want people to consider the following things. Number one, I reached out to AIBs today before we started recording, and at least the ones I got a hold of, not all of them. Maybe I missed, I don't know, maybe a blind spot. Maybe on Monday, they're all going to email me and say, oh, and this happens. I was wrong. I don't know. But at least as of Friday, nothing about Battlemage to this day. They don't know when it's launching. They don't know what to expect. So I don't know. I think, like I've been saying over and over all year, I think Intel's going to claim some sort of paper launch in December. It's probably going to mostly be some limited edition, low volume thing, especially because point number 2 here, again, Pat Gelsinger has literally confirmed in earnings that they plan to wind down dedicated graphics and not focus on them much in the future. And also don't forget that this channel recently leaked the performance and the specs of Battlemage. They are looking kind of like an A770 situation again. Yes, if it launched a year ago, it might be good, but it's going to be launching next to Blackwell and RDNA 4, and will be relegated to mid or low end performance once again. And so, yeah, there you go. As usual, I've noticed a lot of the press, and I do use that term very lightly here, trying to simultaneously clamor that ARC isn't dead while ignoring the fact that AIB still have no idea what Battlemage is, and Pat basically just confirmed that Battlemage is the swan song of ARC. But consider that the Arrow Lake launch wasn't a launch. Right? Remember, they said it's launching, like I don't remember what day, and then it came out weeks later. The Meteor Lake launch was December 31st of 2022. That wasn't a launch. To me, it seems obvious that Intel is doing what they need in order to claim to investors that they haven't missed yet another milestone. So what do you think, Dan?
On shelves, March, whatever they said with Alchemist. I mean, I could easily see it being another one of those situations. Or maybe, I don't know, do you think there's any potential that it's just getting some BS laptop launch or something? Or is there not?
No, I leaked. Remember that it's not coming to laptop.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. ARC is just a disappointment all around, and I guess we're going to get one hopefully less crappy die than what the A770 was on desktop.
Yeah, I mean, I hear Battlemage should be better than what Alchemist was for its time. The drivers, again, it's Intel guys. We'll see. I don't know if they're right. But it should work better. It should have less issues. But I think we have to also consider that Battlemage is going to be entering into a very hostile to GPU market with tons of like Ampere, RDNA 2, RDNA 3, and Lovelace cards on the market, whether it's new or used for discount. And also, AMD's drivers have gotten really good. I mean, in many ways, I kind of think they're better than NVIDIA now. Although NVIDIA did have the new official NVIDIA app come out, and it is way more stable than the GeForce experience was. I can report that. So that's good. But still, that doesn't change my point. NVIDIA's drivers have gotten even better. AMD's have gotten even better. NVIDIA has DLSS 3.8 that just came out. AMD has FSR 4 around the corner. Is there a competitive version of XE Super Sampling? Do they really have any version of Shadow Play or Relive that's competitive? I just feel like if Battlemage comes out and it works well, it's just still going to have fallen behind that much more in software compared to Radeon and NVIDIA because they just don't have the money at Intel to fund that anymore.
Well,
and it's like if it's a 4070 for $400, the 7800 XT is already there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Intel's still, frankly, playing catch up to them. So I don't know why this wouldn't be more of a game of catch up anyways. The only way I could imagine this being a product worth buying is if it's priced like really, really competitively. But
if it's a 4070 for $300,
yeah, then maybe. But like you said, there's
how'd they afford that? I think it's 4 nanometer. It's not a smaller die. It's like they would be losing money. So I don't
like at that point, even if they've already had them produced, like that's the only reason you would want to sell them. But like, I don't know this. I don't expect anything impressive, and this is going to be based on this report here. This is going to be a weird non-launch that they claim is a launch. Like, how many times has Intel done that now in the past 3 years? Like, it's kind of a habit of Intel to call a press release a launch, and that's not what a launch is, Intel.
Yeah, and again, just to say this again, because I have to, because I know there will be annoying people in the comments, my initial ARC effectively canceled video said there would be a Battlemage launch. And I've said there still will be, and that there's just one die left for Celestial, and Pat's already confirmed they're winding down GPU. It's all going as I expected. A crazy, messy ARC Alchemist. Battlemage whimpers out late, which it is late. They said 2023, 2024. If it comes out in December, I mean, look, they missed when they said it was going to come out, and it's not even coming to laptop. And then we'll see what happens with that if there's any Celestial. Celestial could be interesting if this were to sell well, but I just don't see that happening. So it's all going to how I expected to, as much as you could expect anything.
Do you think that slide from a few years ago with the enthusiast performance by like 2024 or whatever?
Or 3, I think. Well, I mean, I think I have it here. Let me pull it up.
Are they still going to say?
Jard will put it on screen too for people.
This is what we were planning.
Yeah, I mean, they said that they were going to basically be in enthusiast with Alchemist, and that Battlemage would touch Ultra Enthusiast, and that Celestial would be above Ultra Enthusiast. Ultra Enthusiast, I don't know what that means.
We're reinventing the 90 class card from NVIDIA, Tom. That's what they're proposing by now.
But like, just put that in perspective, people. They said they would be an Ultra Enthusiast between 23 and 24, or at the end of 24, when Battlemage is announced. I want you to look at that and go, is that a 4090 competitor? Because it needs to at least be that, considering it's going to be competing with the 5090. And the answer is no. They've missed their goals.
What they meant, Tom, is it's a 4090 using 100 watts. That's what they were saying.
Well, using 300. Or
well,
whatever.
Using 300. Well, yeah. But it's a fair comparison, Tom. That's definitely what they meant.
Man, if they did put a slide up there like that, that'd be amazing. Or they're like, beats 40, matches the 4090, and then the fine print laptop edition. All right, let us now move on here to one of the final stories with story number 7. PS5 Pro releases to favorable reviews and impressive sales. Quoting first from Game Rant, and then again a little bit of editorialization. Early reports indicate that the PS5 Pro is selling just as well as the PS4 Pro, which was originally released in 2016. As reported by Gamatsu, the PS5 Pro sold around 13,000 units more than the PS4 Pro did at launch in Japan. Sarkana analyst Matt Piscatella writes, also revealed that the new console sold units in the same ballpark as the PS4 Pro's launch in the United States, indicating a similar degree of success. And Sony's announced the same. It looks like Sony's PlayStation 5 Pro price experiment succeeded, at least at launch. PS5 Pro is showing impressive sales in the US and Japan and meeting or exceeding launch sales of the PS5 Pro. We will see if PS5 Pro continues with this momentum in the coming months, but at least right now, whether you like it or not, it seems like people are willing to pay $700 for a console, and this may be therefore the price of the PlayStation 6. Or if you don't want to pay the MSRP, good news, you can turn to scalpers who are selling it for below MSRP. Well, because they took a loss and they did not expect the stock to be this high. This means that the MSRP is probably as high as people can stomach, though, if scalpers aren't able to sell it for more. I would agree with that. PS5 Pro also released a positive reviews. It delivers on the promises made by Sony, with most games running faster and nicer than PS5, and the PSSR offering better quality upscaling than FSR2, but not quite as good as DLSS. It really does depend on the game, but at a minimum, I had a whole podcast with NX Gamer where we discussed our findings with the PS5 Pro, and we could conclude that there are definitely scenarios where the PS5 Pro crushes the 6800 in performance. Its CPU is seemingly not really ever a bottleneck, but for ray tracing to be impressive relative to Nvidia, it needs to be optimized for RDNA 4. Even if it's unoptimized, it crushes RDNA 2 ray tracing and performance per raster. But compared to Nvidia, it really does depend on the game, with Alan Wake 2 making it look great relative to the PS5 and RDNA 2, but not good relative to Nvidia. So yeah, I mean, I had a whole long discussion, like basically an hour of the last episode with NX Gamer. We don't need to regurgitate all of that, but you also have a PS5 Pro. I think it'd be worth discussing. I mean, it's part of this news cycle, Dan. What do you think of it?
I mean, I don't think everyone should get one. I think this is a thing for people that like PlayStation a lot, and you and I like PlayStation a lot. Quality of life, it's just better than the PS5 base all around. Everything gets consistently higher frame rates, more stable frame rates, and lighting across the board is pretty much better in every game. If you don't care about gaming in 4K, though, definitely don't get it, or because I think this is pointless for you. But yeah, I mean, I like it a lot so far, and having all that storage is pretty nice.
Yeah, surprisingly, the storage thing's actually pretty big. Of course, we could have gotten some other SSD a while ago and thrown that in there, but having a base, the main SSD, be really fast and have 2 terabytes, the difference between that and 800 or even 1,000 gigabytes is you can install like 50 games now. And
yeah,
that is nice. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think if you have the money, the PS5 Pro should be bought by someone who doesn't have a PlayStation yet, is what I would suggest. Because hear me out. Like, all right, so are you going to spend, it depends how you want to put it, but like, I don't know, let's even just do without discs. So the 450 or no, let's do it this. So 500 or actually the discless version is now 380. Well, I'll get to that in the wrap up. So I guess, yeah, 380 or 700. So that's an extra $320. That's a lot more for something that is theoretically sometimes double the performance, but sometimes just 20 to 30% faster. But it does come with a significantly more storage. It's just a little snappier in the OS. It does have Wi-Fi 7 and like, you know, better USB output. All these little updates and stuff.
All of that is noticeably way better too. Like, I mean, games do just download faster on this than they did on the PS5 base.
So if you're someone that is fine with the frame rate being below 60, actually, even if you're someone who does like 4K 30 mode, the PS5 is capable of 4K 30 very easily.
Yeah.
If you're someone that doesn't care about that, or you don't really care about the resolution, then yeah, maybe just get the $380 base PS5. I mean, that's a lot cheaper, you know, but if you're someone that has money to burn, it's like, how many games, and for me, it's like, are you someone that is an enthusiast that games a lot? Are you someone who buys like, you know, 3 games a month or something, or even like just plays games? Because I'd say I play a little less, actually. You know, a major reason I have this is just kind of rewarding myself for the end of the year, because man, we busted our asses this year, Dan, for the channel, or you know, because I just can. But it's like, if you're someone that plays, what I'm trying to say is I don't like play like 20, 40 hours a week anymore, like I did when I was in college. But if you're someone who does play like 4 hours a night, you know, you're probably buying a lot of games. You're going to spend how much in games over the course of the generation? I'd say that's this person who should get this.
Yeah.
But if you're someone that's pretty happy with what you got, No, you don't need it. You really don't. It's more the way I put it too with performance is compared to the PS4 Pro, the median or the average is higher than the PS4 Pro's uplift. The average, because every game is
Oh,
better.
I see what you're saying.
Every
Yeah.
game. I mean, every game just performs better. Like I was surprised that Unpatched Returnal, because it has a dynamic resolution, just looks like you just wipe Vaseline off the screen. It never drops frame rates anymore. Like, whereas with the PS4 Pro, okay, some games were like crazy better performance, but it still had that weak CPU, and so half of the games never got a patch.
And then you have like Rockstar barely improved Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah, well, they gave it a much better resolution, but yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, the frame rate's the thing. So the average uplift, I actually think is better than the PS4 Pro, but the median is lower. Like
Yeah,
a
I see
lot of
what you're
games are
saying.
30% better. Like any game that's unpatched is like 20. Well, not any. Elden Ring, I noticed doubling in some areas in quality mode, which is crazier. Really more like maybe a 70% uplift. Like, but you don't need a patch for it to be noticeable because of how many games have dynamic resolutions, how many times it removes a frame drop. Like on the PS4 to PS4 Pro, going from sometimes dropping to 28 frames to being locked at 30 wasn't nearly as noticeable to sometimes dropping to 45 frames and now being locked at 60 or something. But so yeah, I don't know. It's the craziest examples aren't as crazy this time around, but everything's better. So if you game a lot, I think it's worth it in that regard, but it is definitely not a must-have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, yeah, it's for enthusiasts. It's for if you want to actually get high frame rates, closer to what was tacitly being promised that nobody would expected them to actually meet when the consoles first came out or when this generation first launched. But yeah, definitely not essential. Not everyone needs to go out and buy a PS5 Pro.
No, and I think a lot of this is also like our recommendation is going to hinge on just does it like how many games keep getting patched, because it's a little disappointing how many were patched at first here. It's like, really, Elden Ring isn't that could probably benefit the most. Like I played around with the settings. It's very clear to me that if they fiddled with a couple settings and added PSR, you could probably do 4K 60 ray tracing, but they haven't. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when developers really try to leverage it more than just checking boxes. Because from what I've heard talking to developers is even the games like that are probably showcase games like Resident Evil 8, where it goes from like in the 4K ray tracing mode, I'd say it goes from like 4K 45, 4K 50 to 4K 100 kind of. Wow, what an uplift. But even then, I'm told they basically just checked the box and enabled the default settings to boost it. They didn't like go in and I'm told you can compile the shaders and optimize a few things, fiddle with RAM and this, but few developers have done that so far. And it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Like 2 months from now, maybe 3.
Like 6 months from now, and every game was built from the ground up to at least leverage it, if not optimize for it a little bit. Like I think people may be surprised that if properly optimized, more of them will double performance than you'd expect. If not optimized, it's like 20 to 50, 60% or something. All right. Let us now move on to story number 8. It'll be a quick one, but I think we got to talk about it. Phil Spencer confirms the Xbox handheld. Quoting from Tech Power Up. In a recent interview with Bloomberg, Spencer confirmed that Microsoft is working on an Xbox handheld, although he was very careful not to not overpromise or provide any firm release dates, going so far as to confirm that an Xbox handheld is still years away from release. Well, so that puts to rest anything that they're rushing it out right away. I thought I saw some crazy rumors like, oh, it's coming out next year. But yeah, no way. But so they are making it. They are making an Xbox handheld. I think he also hinted that there will probably be a main console release too, although I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. I mean, with the existence of Steam Deck and all of the other successful handheld things, gaming devices, it makes sense that Microsoft thinks, oh, this might be the time for us to try to push into handheld. I mean, reserving judgment from a lot of what else Xbox has put out recently. Yeah, if it's decently priced and has good specs, I think this thing could be cool. Like if they actually get a good mobile version of Windows running on it or whatever they do. Yeah, cool. It makes sense that Microsoft wants to get their own base version of the handheld market going too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it just depends on how they do it. You got to wonder if they're going to do some ARM device and it's actually weaker than expected and it's really just a
Yeah, who knows?
means of streaming xCloud. I don't know. I really don't know anybody. But it'll be interesting because Sony's working on a handheld too, like where this might go next. To me, yeah, I don't have much to say. Confirms the rumors that I know were out there that they were working on a handheld. But at the same time, this comes in conjunction with them announcing basically everything's coming to PlayStation. I think I even saw that. I didn't look into it, so it's not in the wrap up, but I believe there's something like they basically admitted Halo's coming to PlayStation as well. To me, all of this is they're just turning Xbox into Sega, and they're just like more ways to play, the better, but we're done directly competing. And I think what people need to understand is them going for a handheld. That's them doubling down on. They just want Game Pass everywhere. It's not really about new experiences or directly competing generation, like in the traditional generation idea.
Well, yeah, and this is how Microsoft kind of operates, right? Like they see, oh, this form factor is getting a lot of steam right now.
Sure.
Let's put out our own thing.
All right, so let us now move on to the wrap up. These are stories that we thought are worth discussing, but don't require their own conversation. So number one, we already mentioned it. The PlayStation 5 Slim dropped to the price I thought it should be the whole time, which is to say around $380. Why $380? On the one hand, were Xbox to be competing well, I actually think it should be $329, $319 by now, so that you can get a disc drive with it for $400. I mean, that's what I think would really win over the stubborn people on PS4 that are like, I'm not getting it until it's cheaper than $400, dude. At the same time, though, I think we have to acknowledge that Microsoft continues to try to sell the 4 teraflop Series S for $350. And from that perspective, I just don't know how Sony doesn't go, we're charging 10% more than their console. That's a third the performance. You can't even run some games now. Like, I just, on principle, we're charging 10% more.
Yeah, it's a positive development.
This is where it should stay, by the way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like these holiday price cuts are a lot of the time just soft launches on a new price. So yeah, I would give it a pretty good chance that it does just stay at $380 after this.
I'm not saying it will or won't. I think it should.
Yeah. And
I think it's the right thing. Sounds weird to put it that way.
It's
right thing to do. Yeah.
But Microsoft's insistence on keeping the Series S at $350 is baffling to me, but I guess that's just how hardware works these days, is price drops generally don't happen.
It should be $249 in my opinion.
I agree.
If you want to get Game Pass, put this console, it has 10 gigabytes of RAM. Put this console at a price that's where people go into a Walmart and go, $250? Oh my God. And then give them like half a year of Game Pass for free with it and try to hook them. Like, that's what they should be doing. But yeah, as long as it's $350, I don't know why Sony, I mean, really, why would Sony charge the same price for the PlayStation 5? TSMC cannot legally manufacture 2 nanometer in the United States. Carbon Cry did a little write-up here for it too. For quoting from the Taipei Times, Taiwanese law limits domestic chip makers to produce chips abroad that are at least one generation less advanced in their fabs at home. TSMC told investors in July its next generation A16 chip is to enter volume production in the second half of 2026 after ramping up production of 2 nanometer chips next year. So I don't know. That's really interesting to see that going on. And you have to wonder if tariffs happen, if TSMC will finally repeal that, or if they won't, or if they'll use it as leverage and say, no, we're not repealing that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think TSMC and or Taiwan, because Taiwan is a TSMC. I think Taiwan
kind
really
is.
I think Taiwan wants to be able to play that card for as long as possible.
Yeah. I just think it's still worth mentioning because they're building advanced fabs in the United States. Technically, their law would prohibit using them right away.
Yeah,
I don't know.
True.
But also, Clearwater Forest might get Adamantine or some form of Xeon will. I guess Pat Gelsinger in an earnings call announced Adamantine is finally coming, but not to gaming, to Xeon first.
I mean, I don't have any thoughts on this. I guess Adamantine is indeed a thing.
It is finally a thing. By the way, exclusively leaked by this channel. Sometimes I forget this. I'm like, where did I exclusively leak that? It was actually the same video where I leaked Strix Halo.
Oh, really? That's funny.
That video was like crazy long and had like a 4070 supply update, Adamantine, and Strix Halo. I think that was one of those things where like I was like putting this whole thing together, and it was like, well, I got to tell them about Strix Halo too. So just ballooned into one of those giant videos. But yeah, another Moore's Law is dead leak confirmed finally. Also, we have AMD's bizarre naming schemes continue. This leak comes from Golden Upgrade Pig, a Beely leaker with a pretty good track record, who says they're going to go with 8060S for the name of the graphics in Strix Halo.
I wonder if there's just a rule at AMD where, guys, we need to change branding every 2 seconds. Every 2 to 3 generations. Can't last longer.
No, can't do it.
And hey, it has the added effect of it kind of sounds like an Nvidia GPU now, so maybe people will buy it.
Yeah, maybe. It's just so freaking stupid. Anyways, AI Fish AI Wrangler writes in, if the Strix Halo iGPU is really going to be named 8060S, why can't AMD stick with naming schemes for more than a few years on laptop? This seems I don't know. I think it's stupid.
AMD doesn't know how to be a company that's in a good position. That's all I've got.
We keep saying it. Intel doesn't know how to be number 2. AMD doesn't know how to be number 1.
Yeah.
Also, I don't. This was here in the wrap up. There were some reports that Intel is matching AMD in integrated graphics performance, but Carbon Cry did a bit of an analysis on this and found that Lunar Lake's GPU slight edge is only really at 28 watts when the CPU's taking up a lot of that power budget, and most tests are actually won or tied by Strix. There's a few outliers skewing the geomean. So I don't know. I put that in the wrap up, and Carbon Cry actually dug into the data and just wanted to make it very clear. They're tied. Battlemage and Strix iGPU performance are tied. Mm-hmm. Techno writes in, what if ARC was just a 3D chess move to force game devs to support Intel's iGPUs on games? Considering the driver issues the A770 had, this is also likely to improve gaming performance on the iGPUs too. No. There's no 3D chess moves here. ARC just didn't pan out as well as they wanted it to.
Intel is 3D chess flailing and releasing a bunch of bad products. It's all part of their bigger plan. Panther Lake is going to come back and be the best product of all time. They've learned from all of their mistakes from Raptor Lake, Alchemist, Battlemage, Arrow Lake.
They were all intentional.
Lunar Lake.
And I could hear the argument that this is kind of what they're trying to do, but if that were to be what they are trying to do, I gotta say, then they should have done one die, one 192-bit die, and then shove that out for 250, 300, and just keep doing that. But the fact that they tried to do multiple dies, and again, they told me they wanted to beat the 3070 Ti. Mm-hmm. That wasn't their goal. There's no 3D chess here. I don't mind the idea of that strategy, but they didn't do that, and they're still not really doing that with Battlemage. Just make one die that works, Intel, put it at a reasonable price, and save money. But that's just not what they're doing.
Yeah.
All right, we have one more reader mail here. AI Mobile Chief writes in and says, Tom, honest question. When are you going to get off Twitter and X and join Blue Sky or Mastodon? I don't know. I mean, it's something I could see happening. I mean, X has been ruined, but for tech news and spreading tech news, it still seems to work fine. So for my purposes, as long as that continues to seems to be able to work well, I'm going to stay on there for now. But I have heard from people that have switched to other alternatives that they might work better. And if I start to see the numbers there be far, far, far better for the channel, then yeah, maybe I'll switch. I mean, a lot of it is I don't want to switch unless I switch because I don't want to have to manage 100 things at once.
You don't want to do 3 social media promotional accounts?
No, and this is a deliberate choice from Moore's Law is Dead. We want to be a lean company. Me, Dan, then we now have Gerard, who's getting up to not full time, but he's getting up there. And I'm paying him to do a lot of work now. And then next to that, Carbon Cry is being brought on more and more to help out with stuff and being paid as well. I like it that way. I'm not on Float Plane or Bleep Bloop or Rumble or Ploop Plop because I'm on Patreon. I manage Patreon. Go there. I'm on YouTube. I manage YouTube. I'm not on Nebula or Vimeo. I'm here in an RSS feed. And then I post also to Twitter. And eventually, if I post to something else, I might, but I want to do that because that's the one that I manage. But that's where I'm at.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, the podcasts I listen to, I'm hearing more often that they're on Blue Sky seems to be the one that's taking over really quickly over Mastodon, but I don't know.
And
We'll
there's
see what
another
it
one
is.
too, I believe. I don't know. Was it Threads?
Threads is just Facebook's. It's a literal clone of Twitter, from what I can tell. But
okay, maybe that's all we need. But yeah, I mean, but yeah. So I don't know. I've heard of some people using that too. So I might. But there's a part of me that looks around, and at least tech Twitter still seems to be a thing. That functions. So if that part functions, I'm going to do that. And also, I think I have like over 25,000 followers on Twitter. Like, that's actually pretty crazy high. I don't want to ditch that unless it really, really makes sense. And for now, I don't think it makes sense for me to.
But hear me out, Tom. Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Mastodon, X, Blue Sky, all of them at once.
It's just, I mean, I just don't see the point. You know where to find me, guys. But all right, that's going to do it for this rather lean and shorter episode, but I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said in the beginning, I will be on vacation this week. Might still put out a video from the hotel if I get info on something I'm being told I might get info on. Probably be a quick update and a down period or something when it's raining outside. But otherwise, we still got another episode coming with James Pryor next. And then I think there's still going to be plenty of stuff to talk about in December, actually. So look forward to that. And yeah, I think that's it, Dan. Any final words?
Don't think so.
Well, everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please remember, subscribe to Moore's Law is Dead, like I said, on YouTube, and ring the bell button so you don't miss that upcoming content. Also, and remember, it really does help the algorithm if you support us by subscribing on YouTube as well. It's not just the views. It really actually that helps propel views and engagement as well. Comment below for the algorithm. Like the video, subscribe to Moore's Law, to Broken Silicon on your podcast app of choice. Give us a review there on Apple Podcasts. That's been slowing down a bit. Get us some reviews on Apple Podcasts. That helps with that, or on Spotify as well. And so consider supporting us on Patreon. Like I said, that's the best way to support us. That's where you get exclusive content like Die Shrink. A new one just came out about Nvidia's APUs. No ads. Hundreds of those for you if you subscribe. There's a whole back catalog there, a Discord, and a lot. Like, you'll be able to ask us questions there as well. But all right, I'm gonna start rambling if I keep talking. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a great week, everybody.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carbon Cry and Carrie No Sugata as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page in the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie No Sugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Foles, Z Jits, Daniel D, Deke, Nicholas Puckner, Aaron Close, Jan Rano, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, MJB1, SNES Chalmers, Jem Ferriero, Velcom Alev, Toka, Jensen Wang, Gregorius Acker, Sarcastro, Chris Rich, Evan Dingle, Compressed AI Blocks, Trias Boy 08, Hal Booma, Shredward, Holden Mobley, Samuel Molas, Jordan Simkovic, Julian Leak, The Boz Haas, Jonathan, Chrysantine, Franco Frederic, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Slicky, Neithra Zink, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Mads, Suitsu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cakes, Gamers Unite, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Tommy, Aisha, Mark Raidmaker, James Anderson, Jamie Witters, Colada, Cameron, Tenry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Reginald Ari, Tikata, Mai Sharona, Winwing, Winstar, Corey Leonard, James I. Raider, Little Germany, JSMMH, Shay, Milton, Melodic Warrior, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Dave Schultz, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, Joe Foot, Brian Scanlon, Hardland, Jensen Angima, Joseph Kelly, Slushba, Himsa Gung, Tails2299, Neil Valverga, Sisyphos7771, The Forbidden Juice, Brian Wright, RB Racer, AC, Alex Vega, Dr. J. Mad, Free D, Michael Cozy, John Swin, Crystal Joe, Elber Gunn, Keycom, Solarized 80, Jeffrey Gentleman, Matthew Marlowe, Brian P. Sprutnik, Hoodat 42, Figug, Haguk, Cornster 671, Penta Winta, Hal Richard, Angel of Cake, Mr. Tiger, John Wick, Boomsick, Porcelain, Oats Curry, King 3, Nick, Suzmania, Sakosha, Armand, Vacatura, State Farm Steak, Rye Hill, Chi Bulls, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.